He thought he was abandoning a helpless wife. He had no idea she was the one funding the life he bragged about. When Lena found the affair, she didn't scream, beg, or break down. She planned for 6 months. And on the night her husband tried to humiliate her in public, she destroyed him with one sentence that made the entire room go silent.
Heels. Lena Morrison sweeps into the gala, a vision in crimson silk, moving like a calculated storm through the gilded hall. She is finally Richard once upon her throne, choosing instead a dress that commands every eye in the room. 5 years she spent playing the invisible loyal wife, her spirit smothered by duty. Tonight, that mask falls. Above her, the Bennett family sits on their high platform, basking in stolen glory, oblivious to the fact their kingdom rests on sand. Heels. Lena's heels click against the marble floor, a steady metronome marking the countdown to their inevitable fall. She spots Richard, his face tightening with that familiar stinging contempt. He sits casually, his arms slung over a chair, her chair, now claimed by Candace Wright. With gold woven into her hair and a predatory smile, Candace wears a fortune like a trophy. Richard ignores his legal wife as if she were a ghost, a cruel performance of betrayal played out before the world's elite heels. Candace laughs with Richard's father, already wearing the family name like stolen jewelry. When Lena arrives, Richard looks right through her, treating the woman who built his empire like an unwelcome stranger. His voice is a cold needle of condescension. Lena holds her ground, asserting her place as his wife, but Patricia simply clinks her crystal glass. She looks at her daughter-in-law as if she were a dusty relic from a past they have already decided to bury and forget. Heels. With a voice like ice, Patricia notes that the family table is full, suggesting Lena find a seat with the common guests. It is a public execution of her status. When Lena points to her empty chair, Richard's laughter rings out, piercing the sudden silence of the ballroom. He stands, whispering for her to hide in the shadows before she makes a scene, calling Candace a mere family friend. It is a polite lie that everyone in the room recognizes for exactly what it is. Heels. In this world of high society, a family friend is just a code word for the woman who smells of another's perfume and sends midnight messages. Lena stands there, shattered, remembering 5 long years of making herself small to satisfy Richard's vanity. Now, he raises his voice, making sure every guest watches him humiliate her. He tells her she hasn't earned her place, treating the secret architect of his entire life like a servant who has forgotten how to bow to her master. Heels. Richard's lecture on merit is the ultimate tragic joke. His father remains a silent statue while Patricia carefully inspects her manicure, and Candace wears the sharp smirk of a victor. Lena can feel the heat of every judgmental stare. The ball of silence is a heavy, suffocating blanket. She sees the board members and executives watching this public shaming, none of them aware that every single person in this building is actually drawing a paycheck from her hidden bank accounts. Heels. The staff and security stand frozen, silenced by a truth they are legally bound to keep hidden. Lena once believed her anonymity was a shield for her marriage, but it turned into a prison. Richard raises his champagne, dismissing her with the casual wave one uses on a fly. He tells her the back tables are more her speed, eager to start his presentation. He has no idea that by casting her out, he is just signaling the start of his own ruin. Heels. That single flicking gesture of his hand is the death blow to her patience. Lena stands still for 3 long seconds, burning the faces of her enemies into her memory with cold, surgical focus. Their arrogance is the fuel for her fire. She turns away and walks across the ballroom, her red dress trailing behind her like a line of blood under the spotlights. It is a long walk to the back of the room, but she isn't retreating. She is preparing to strike. Heels. The room is filled with the sound of whispers and the weight of judging eyes. Lena takes a seat at a far table, a perfect vantage point to watch the stage she paid for months ago. As she adjusts her silk dress, a waiter approaches, his hand shaking as he nearly calls her by her true title. The entire staff is holding its breath. Richard thinks he has won a small, petty victory, but he has actually just walked directly into the lioness's open jaws. Heels. In the shadows of the back row, Lena finally steps into her true power. She checks her phone, reading the rapid updates from Grace, her chief of staff at Morrison Holdings. The security teams are in position and the lawyers are ready for her signal. Her employees are burning with rage on her behalf. Grace sends a final message of support, and Lena sends 2 words back: proceed as planned. She looks at the steel and glass around her. This is her empire, feels. This skyscraper is the beating heart billion-dollar legacy Lena's father left behind, a crown she took over at age 27. She became a titan in the dark, ruling her empire from behind a wall of lawyers and NDAs. When she met Richard, she hid her wealth, desperate for a love that wasn't built on her money. She played the part of a quiet woman with a modest trust fund, just to see if he could love the person without the billions. Feels. She wanted a partner, not a gold digger, so she let him believe he was the superior one. She allowed Richard to live in the fantasy that he was the sun and she was just a planet in his orbit. He fed on that lie for years while she slowly disappeared into his shadow. But as the music stops and the ballroom lights begin to dim, Lena sits in the back row, exactly where he banished her, waiting for the curtain to rise on his destruction. Feels. Richard leans back with the hollow confidence of a man who thinks he owns the world. Patricia laughs at a secret joke while Candace checks her reflection in her phone. Not one of them bothered to check the program or wonder why a Bennett gala is being held in the Morrison flagship tower. Their ego has blinded them to the trap. The master of ceremonies walks to the microphone, and the official destruction of their reputation is about to begin for everyone to see. Feels. Jeffrey Santos takes the stage, a man who has protected the Morrison family since Lena was a little girl. He begins with a tribute to Thomas Morrison, the man who built this corporate temple from nothing. Richard's face twists in confusion. He expected a night celebrating the Bennett name, not a history lesson on a dead rival. The mood in the room shifts as the guests realize something is wrong. Richard can finally feel the floor beneath him starting to crack and give way. Feels. Jeffrey speaks of the mysterious one who took her father's place and built a global empire in the shadows. He describes a leader who has ruled with brilliance for 5 secret years. Patricia whispers to a panicked Richard, who can only stare in total confusion. Then the hammer falls. Jeffrey prepares to introduce the owner and chief executive officer of Morrison Holdings. The real power in this room is about to step out of the dark and into the light for all. Feels. A single spotlight cuts through the dark, landing perfectly on the very back of the room. Lena stands up, her red silk glowing like fire. When Lena Morrison echoes through the hall, the silence becomes heavy and suffocating. At the head table, Richard's glass slips, smashing against the floor like a gunshot. He turns a deathly shade of pale. Lena begins her walk toward the stage, each step a pulse of reclaimed power and a cold, final victory over them all. Feels. The room shifts as the staff stands at military attention for their true queen. The board members finally see the face of the genius they have been following for years. Waves of shock hit the guests as the puzzle pieces finally fit together. Richard sits frozen, his face a mask of pure, raw terror. The man who tried to keep his wife in the shadows is now blinded by her radiance. He was never the king of this castle, just a temporary guest. Feels. At 27 years old, Lena Morrison felt like she was drowning in the middle of a luxury gala. Her father had died only 3 months before, leaving her a cold, massive empire she never wanted to rule. One day they were eating dinner. The next he was gone forever. Now she was the reluctant queen of a corporate kingdom, crushed by the weight of her crown. Every condolence felt like a sharp insult. She was surrounded by gold, but it felt like a cemetery. Feels. The family legacy felt like a heavy chain she could never break. Suddenly a man appeared, Richard Bennett, with the easy charm of a movie star. He saw that she wanted to run away, and she felt a spark of real connection. She told him her name was only Lena, hiding the Morrison name to protect herself from the sharks in the room. She was hiding her true status from the very start, and Richard had no idea he was talking to a billionaire. Feels. The Morrison name was a target she wasn't ready to carry. Richard was surprisingly honest, a trait she found fascinating in a room full of liars. For the first time since her father's funeral, she actually laughed. They looked out at a boring parking lot, such a contrast to the fake luxury behind them. It was a moment of rare truth in a world of performance. But then, his eyes darkened, and the simple conversation turned into something much more intense. Feels. Richard's gaze felt like he was stripping away her armor, and Lena felt dangerously close to the edge. He said these galas were just big plays where everyone wears a mask to hide who they really are. She asked if he liked the show, and he admitted he was tired of it all. He spoke of wanting to escape his family's heavy expectations, never knowing he was talking to the woman who had already turned the art of the mask into a masterpiece. Feels. They stand like marble statues amidst the swirling dancers. Lena confesses her father is gone. The public sees a titan of strength, but beneath the surface she is a hollow ghost behind a practiced smile. Richard holds her gaze, really sees her, and murmurs that true power is found in the ruins of one's soul. She searches his eyes. In this room of wolves, his warmth feels like a miracle. It is a heavy, singular moment. Finally, her walls give way. She is falling. Feels. He whispers an invitation to leave this empty ballroom for a quiet cafe nearby. Her lawyers would scream. He is an unknown danger, but her heritage feels like lead. She aches for something real. They slip away. There is no talk of mergers or stock prices, only this moment. He speaks of old films, books, and family mishaps. In this dim corner, the crushing weight of her secret crown finally lifts. Feels. That night, the steel dissolves. She is no longer the chief executive, just a woman sharing with a beautiful stranger. When he asks for more of her time, she says yes. 3 nights pass in a blur. Richard courts her with a sweet, ancient sincerity. To him, she is just a girl in the city. He cannot imagine her home as a stone fortress on the hill. She is playing 2 parts with lethal perfection. Feels. Their universe narrows to candlelight and soft confessions. Richard speaks of his own war, a father who sees finance as a stain on the family honor. He feels like an actor trapped in a tragedy he did not write. Lena hears the mirror of her own pain. She is giving the show of her life, acting the simple girl while ruling a worldwide empire. 3 months later, he says those 3 words. The stakes rise, and so does her lie. Feels. Under the park trees, he stops and reaches for her hands. He speaks his love with a conviction that leaves her breathless. He thinks she is the only one who sees his soul past the money or the name. Shame floods her like a rising river. She loves him, but he is blind to the massive structure of her world. Can he love her while she hides her throne? She repeats the vow, but the shadow of the secret stretches out. Feels. He is her anchor through the grief, yet her life is a locked vault. A year goes by. She is now the secret queen of Morrison Holdings, ruling a silent empire. There is a dark thrill in being unknown. Then, in their favorite cafe, Richard drops to one knee. Surrounded by the morning crowd and the smell of coffee, he offers a ring. It is a simple, beautiful band that promises a future that freezes her heart. She will be his wife. Feels. Marry me, he begs softly. She says yes, a woman desperate to escape her own solitude. But the truth stays hidden. The wedding is small and quiet. Richard thinks she is just modest. A large party would destroy her mask. She invites only those who will not speak. Richard's parents attend, hiding their disgust. They think he is marrying down. They have no idea she could buy their whole history with a single stroke of a pen. Feels. At the party, Patricia's eyes are cold and suspicious. She wonders where this nameless girl came from. That night, Lena nearly tells him everything. She knows a marriage of shadows cannot last. But Richard is drunk on his role as the hero. He promises to be her shield and her provider. You will never need anything, he whispers. He sees himself as the king and the master. He has no clue that she controls the very air in his lungs. Feels. So she hides in the silence. She wants the feeling of safety, a break from the heavy crown. Their first year is a perfect dance. Richard is the ideal husband, showing off his wife to his friends. She plays the part beautifully, charming everyone. But while he is at work, she is the ghost in the machine. She runs Morrison Holdings through secret codes and hidden meetings. She is managing a global empire from their couch, while he thinks she is out shopping. Feels. She rules from the dark while he thinks she is at lunch with friends. The lie is now her skin, a gentle wife at sunrise, a cold CEO at sunset. By the 2nd year, the mask slips. Richard wins a deal and acts like a king. At dinner, he brags about $50 million. He thinks he has finally made his father proud. He feels like a giant, never knowing he is just a small tree in the shadow of a redwood. Feels. Lena claps for him, never mentioning the $2 billion merger she signed that morning. His win is just a footnote to her, but she shields his ego. Then his pride starts to rot. Success turns into a need for control. He begins to judge her clothes and her face with cold eyes. He tells her to dress more modestly for his image. He mocks her quiet life, telling her to find a charity for some purpose. The irony is bitter. Feels. He tells her to be more like the women in his mother's world. The sting remains. By year 3, Richard stops caring about her life entirely. He is lost in his own stress and numbers. She is just a prop in his theater now. When she tells him they are drifting apart, he calls her hysterical. His tiredness is a wall against her. He never suspects that the ground he walks on is held up by her invisible hand. Heels. Richard saw Lena as a weak emotional burden. He had no idea her silence was a fuse leading to a bomb. She was not ready to burn their marriage down just yet, still grieving for the love they once had. A public split felt like a loss. But as the fourth year began, the game changed. Enter Candace, a new piece on the board. Heels. Candace was the perfect replacement. Young, hungry, and beautiful. She was always at their dinners, her laugh too loud for Richard's dull jokes. Lena watched the disaster with cold eyes. She saw Richard show off like a peacock when she was near. Work trips were just cover for their affairs. Lena might have screamed once, but she was done begging for love from a man who had forgotten the woman he used to worship. Heels. 6 months ago, the play ended. Richard left his phone out, showing a text from Candace. Last night was a dream, it said. Lena sat in the thick silence, counting months of lies, secret jokes, stolen nights, and Richard's coldness toward her. She put the phone back, kept her face calm, and served dinner like always. But the wife Richard thought he knew, that woman died in the freezing light of that one moment. Heels. This was the end. Lena swapped her grief for a plan. She called her most dangerous ally Grace Torres, the genius at Morrison Holdings. I am tearing this down, Lena said, and I will do it like a surgeon. She needed time to gather proof, sign the papers, and protect her wealth. She was not just leaving. She was going to pull the rug out from under his cheating feet. Heels. She imagined the exact second Richard would see he traded a queen for a ghost. The stage? The grand annual gala. 6 months of careful work for total destruction. When Grace asked what happens to Richard, Lena answered with cold indifference. He stays for the status. Grace knew then. This was not a divorce. This was a trap. Lena would not tell the rich of her power. She would show them. Heels. For 6 months, she played the quiet ghost while building his ruin. While Richard ignored her, she was tightening her hold on the throne. Now, at the party in a blood-red dress, she finally exhales. She hides in the darkness, watching the board members and her cheating husband on stage. She chose this spot for a reason. She wanted a front-row seat to the very moment his entire world started to burn. Heels. She wanted to see every flicker of pain during the fall. Richard sat close to Candace, acting like he owned her. Candace was a masterpiece of expensive lies. Gold hair, a dress that cost more than a house, and a laugh that sounded like hollow bells. She moved through the room with skill, never knowing that the woman who was about to destroy her was watching like a hawk from the dark. Heels. Patricia was charmed by Candace. She saw the perfect wife, classy, social, and born to the right family. To her, she was the cure for Lena. Lena remembers the night Candace showed up at dinner 8 months ago. Patricia was glowing, praising the girl's charity work. She gave Candace the love she had denied Lena for years. It was a secret club for the rich, and Lena was the only one left outside the gate. Heels. From high-end galas to boardrooms, Candace was the picture of grace. Lena walked in to find her already sitting next to Richard's empty chair. He was late, like always. Candace gave a smile that was sharp and fake. You must be Lena, she said softly. Richard talks about you constantly. It was strange, Lena thought, since he had not said her name in months. Then Candace mentioned their new business. It was the first wrong note in a song of betrayal. Heels. Richard had a price, usually paid in ego or hard currency. Candace was just the newest ornament on his arm, paraded through every dinner and gala. Patricia mocked Lena's absence while praising the mistress, completely oblivious those secret hours weren't for tea. They were for high-stakes boardrooms and hostile takeovers. While the Morrison family played house with a blonde stranger, Lena was the invisible architect, the only thing keeping their massive empire from turning to dust. Heels. To Patricia, Lena was nothing but a ghost of excuses. Richard had abandoned her long ago, trading his wife for the thrill of a fresh pursuit. But digital footprints never lie. 6 months back, his infidelity became a permanent record. His messages dripped with resentment, while Candace whispered that he deserved better. The cruelest cut, he called Lena suffocating. The very man she had supported was now painting her as the villain in his pathetic midlife crisis fantasy. Heels. Suffocating. It was a cruel joke. Lena had spent years trying to steady their sinking ship, only for him to mistake her devotion for a chain. Richard tells his mistress he will leave once he has enough cash for his poor, helpless wife. Candace actually calls this treachery noble. The sheer arrogance is staggering. He honestly thinks he is the great provider, looking at his life partner as a charity case he needs to settle before finding his freedom. Heels. He has no idea that every cent in his name actually belongs to her. The house, the prestige. It is all built on her money, hidden behind corporate curtains. Every triumph he bragged about was quietly financed by her genius. Richard plays the part of the weary martyr, acting like he stays out of pity while tallying up a divorce settlement for poor Lena. Watching him laugh with his lover, cold, hollow silence. Then a waiter arrived. Heels. She almost corrected him. Her name is Morrison, not Bennett, but the act only had 15 minutes left. Daniel, the waiter, looked unsettled. He told her she did not belong among the service staff, even though that is where her husband had hidden her. Daniel is a veteran of the company. He served her father for 30 years. He knows who really holds the power. Seeing his true employer treated like a shameful secret was a level of disrespect he simply could not abide. Heels. None of us think this is right, Daniel whispers. Every worker in the room, from the kitchen to the floor, watches her know exactly whose name is on their paychecks. They see their real boss being mocked by a fake. Lena promises him that the reckoning is coming very soon. Daniel sees the fire in her eyes and nods. The staff is ready. 10 minutes until the world flips. Grace sends a text. The board is assembled. The eyes of the elite are waiting. Heels. Your father would be proud. The words stung. Thomas Morrison built a kingdom and taught her that silence is the deadliest weapon. He knew the most dangerous player in the room is the one who goes unnoticed. For 5 long years, she played the dutiful wife. She kept quiet as Richard became a cold, distant stranger. She stayed silent through the lies and the cheating. She let him believe he had won, all while she was quietly sharpening the blade to take it all back. Heels. Tonight, the mask falls off. Across the room, Richard flirts with his mistress like a teenager. Unaware of the chaos, united. The whole family outs united, though they have treated Lena like a ghost for years. Just 1,000 small cuts to bleed out her self-worth. Lena remembers 2 years ago, the day Patricia's eyes turned to stone as she spat out her hate. That special brand of cruelty is about to meet its match. This is the final reckoning. Heels. Patricia once sneered that Richard needed a wife with bloodlines and social status to lift them up. When Lena mentioned love, the woman just laughed. Love is for novels, she said. Marriage is a business deal. Then came the final insult. She called Lena a nobody who tricked her son in a moment of weakness. No career, no class, just a parasite eating their money. Lena left that night with a fake headache, but she took something real with her. A perfect plan to burn it all down. Heels. Lena cried in her car, not because of the insults, but because Richard did not care. He barely saw her leave. That was the day she changed. She traded her tears for hard work, digging into the secret files of Morrison Holdings. She counted the millions she had made from, while they treated her like a servant. She was the real genius behind their wealth, regardless of the role they gave her. She decided to stay in the shadows a little longer. Let them think she is nothing. Heels. Grace arrives like a ghost in deep red, giving the 5-minute warning. She says the dress is a masterpiece because Lena is now impossible to overlook. That is the plan. Lena wants everyone to see the exact spot where her husband tried to bury her alive. Grace looks at the head table, promising that Richard's regret will be total. Lena just watches him. The cheating, the lies, the constant disrespect. It all comes due tonight. The marriage was a disaster, but now she is serving up the cold, hard truth. Heels. Lena admits they were never right for each other. She just ignored the red flags. Grace says he never deserved her, but Lena owns her part in the tragedy. Grace asks if she is ready for the world to shatter. Lena has seen this moment in her head 1,000 times. She does not expect pain. She expects shame. There is a massive difference, but having your personal life torn open in public, that is cold. Grace calls it cold. Lena calls it the truth. Heels. It is quite simple. Richard did not love her. He loved himself and the power he thought he possessed. Tonight, everyone will see he tried to delete the woman who actually owns his name. The lights dim as the show begins. Grace gives a final nod before walking to the control booth. Every screen in this ballroom is about to show the fraud, the numbers, and the hidden lies. Everything Lena built is about to go live. There is no turning back. The game is finally over. Heels. The stage is set for the final verdict. Jeffrey Santos taps the mic and the room goes silent. Richard and his family sit there like royalty, completely unaware their world is about to explode. They do not realize their castle is built on sand and lies. Lena adjusts her stress and takes a breath. 6 months of silence and planning lead to this single moment. Her marriage is dead, But the truth is about to scream. The forgotten wife is stepping into the glare to burn their lives down. Eels. She was never just a side character. Tonight, she proves she was the lead all along. Jeffrey's voice booms through the speakers, her speakers in her building, at her party. Richard is still clueless. Suddenly, a spotlight hits her, sharp as a knife, turning the rest of the room to shadows. She cannot see the audience, but she can hear the gasp. It is a wave of shock, a punch to the ego of the room. Every step toward that stage carries the weight of 5 long years. Heels. Her heels hit the marble like a ticking clock. Heads spin and the air fills with frantic whispers. Is that his wife? What is she doing? Richard is paralyzed, his champagne glass shattered like a fallen soldier. Candace is gasping for air while Patricia looks like a general watching her army die. James just stares, unable to recognize the woman he ignored for years. Lena does not blink. She just marches forward as their shared world begins to melt away into nothingness. Heels. She has practiced this entrance 1,000 times. No hurry, no hesitation. Just the steady, rhythmic walk of a woman who has finally found her power. She reaches the stage, and Jeffrey gives her a quick nod, whispering that it is time. As Lena stands at the mic, the room snaps into focus. The leaders of the company and the giants of the city. The people who looked past her for years are now forced to sit and watch her take the crown. Heels. There they are. The banks, the media family that tried to delete her. Lena gripped to finding her feet. No more playing small to save Richard's pride. Good evening, she says, her voice cutting the air like a blade. I know you are confused, so let me be clear. My name is Lena Morrison, daughter of Thomas. For 5 years, I have been the chief executive and the only owner of this entire empire. The silence in the room suddenly explodes into pure chaos. Heels. Complete mayhem follows. The crowd is searching for a reality that does not feel like a nightmare. Richard stands up fast, his chair screeching the floor as he screams that she is a liar. Lena meets his eyes, cold and thoughtful. I am not lying, Richard, she says softly. But I have been silent, living the lie of our marriage for far too long. She turns from him to the room. My father built this company from nothing. He turned a single dream into a dynasty. Heels. Real estate, technology, and medicine. His vast empire became hers in a heartbeat. 5 years ago, he passed away, leaving his whole legacy to his only child. Lena had been his shadow since 22, a silent witness to a legend. Now, heels. The monitors glow as Grace begins her talk. There stands Thomas Morrison, the giant, with Lena beside him in every meeting, though the public never truly noticed her. To many, Morrison was the peak of integrity. Heels. He taught her that true power never needs to scream. He found strength in the heavy nature of silence. Heels. She learned that lesson far too well, staying hidden in the shadows for far too long. Photos of father and daughter drift across the screen. At 27, she was heartbroken and drowning, yet protected by a wall of solid steel. Heels. Her board and lawyers built the fortress, allowing her to reign without being seen. She wanted the power but hated the blinding spotlight. Richard looks hollow now, clinging to his mother while she drips poison into his ear. Heels. He stares at the screen like a ghost at his own funeral. Then Lena speaks softly. I met someone. Heels. They met at a gala just like this. He was charming and soft, waking up a joy she thought was dead forever. He chased her without knowing her title or her staggering net worth. To her, it felt like the ultimate pure romance. Heels. Their wedding photo flashes on the screen, a beautiful, perfect lie. That night, she decided to keep her empire a secret. She wanted a man who saw her, not her assets. She craved a life completely removed from the suffocating shadow of the Morrison name. Heels. She wanted a love that was just hers. Heels. For 5 years, she lived 2 lives. She ran a global empire from her office, while her husband thought she was out spending money on trifles. She closed billion-dollar mergers, while he bragged about $50 million leftovers. Heels. She supported thousands of families while he told her she was aimless. Richard flinches as the truth sinks in. She isn't here just to embarrass him. She is here because the secrets are dead tonight. The mask falls. Heels. Morrison Holdings finally reveals its true master. No more lies, no more excuses. It is over. Heels. Under her quiet leadership, the company grew by 40%. They broke into 6 new markets and funded medical breakthroughs, creating over 3,000 new jobs. The screens glow with the proof of her victory. But tonight holds a deeper truth. Heels. She is launching the Morrison Foundation. This project will back the young minds that the old world ignored. They will provide money, guidance, and the tools to build a real future. This is about creating a fair world, not just helping the rich. Feels. It is a brilliant display of leadership. Feels. Deafening applause fills the hall, and Lena lets the sound wash over her. She then reveals a new branch focused on green urban growth, sustainable, fair cities built to breathe. This has been her secret mission for 2 years, and now it steps into the light. The board members nod as one. They see the leader who has been guiding them from the dark. But then her tone turns to ice. She orders a full audit of every partner and investment in the company portfolio. There will be no exceptions for anyone at all. Feels. She is cleaning house, cutting ties with anyone who lacks a moral compass. Without honor, you have no seat at her table. Her eyes lock onto Richard with cold precision. His family wealth has been a leech on her legacy for far too long, and now she is cutting the cord. Patricia stands there, white as a ghost. Lena thanks the loyal few who stood by her when she was just a face in the crowd. She has proven that she earned this seat through work, not just by her name. Feels. Jeffrey hands her a glass and Lena raises a toast. To Thomas Morrison, she says, who taught me that true power is a quiet storm, and to a future built on the raw truth. The room explodes. A standing ovation born from pure collective shock. Reporters type with frantic speed. CEOs question everything they thought they knew in a heartbeat. Richard looks small and shattered. His pride is gone, replaced by a blank, empty stare. He realized much too late that he never knew her at all. He is broken. Feels. The wife he thought he owned was just an act. Lena wore that mask perfectly while building a billion-dollar empire in the shadows. Candace watches in terror, realizing the man she won is a hollow shell. She thought she was taking a winner from a victim, but she only helped ruin her own future. Patricia stands frozen, gasping as if the air has vanished. All her cruel jokes about class and status have finally turned to ash in her mouth. She is silent. Feels. The room feels like the wake of a silent revolution. James looks drained, like a man whose debts have finally come due. Lena sets her glass down with a sharp click and asks her guests to finish their dinner. A move of total poise. She tells them business updates will follow next week before walking out. Jeffrey stays at her side, a faithful guard. The crowd moves back with a respect that feels like a bow. The pity is gone. Now, there is only raw, pure awe for the true sovereign. She is the boss. Feels. Industry giants now beg for her attention. They are desperate to talk about her new green projects. Everyone wants a piece of the leader they once ignored. Lena plays the part with grace, staying in total control of the room. This is her world, a far cry from the tiny kitchen where she played the quiet wife. Richard tries to stop her, looking messy and desperate. Security moves to step in, but Lena waves them off. Let him see her power. Let him watch. Let him finally understand. Feels. Patricia drags Richard to the exit like a child being kicked out, the Bennett name collapsing in real time. Lena watches the trash clear itself from the room. She has won back her honor, and their small drama is nothing but static now. Grace leans in to whisper that she was perfect. Lena asks when Richard will try to strike back. Security is on him, Grace promises. Good. Lena takes a new drink. Her work tonight is finished. She feels a weight lifted. Feels. From here on, all talk goes through the lawyers. The divorce papers are ready for tomorrow morning. She is set on burning out this poison once and for all. The party goes on, but everyone is talking about the secret mogul and the man who lost it all. Lena drifts through the crowd, hiding her tired soul behind a red dress and a fierce new name. She is a symbol now, a mix of tragedy and win. She won't stop until she finds her peace. Her sanctuary calls. Feels. She needs to be alone to let the night sink in. Still, she feels a cold, strange peace. She came out of the fire whole. She spoke her truth, and the world didn't break. Her future looks bigger than ever. The echoes of applause are still in the air when Richard suddenly breaks through the line. Security stays close, but they can't easily drag out a husband without a scene in the middle of the room. A messy fight is now bound to happen. It is time. Feels. He grabs her arm with a desperate hand, whispering that they have to talk privately. Lena stands panicked and feels nothing but a huge hole. He is choking on his own public shame. He accuses her of madness and says her hidden money is a scam. He is furious that she kept quiet for years. Lena doesn't flinch at his hate. She calmly tells him she never hid who she was. She just didn't need to prove her worth to a man who was blind to it. She is done. The end of it. Feels. He pulls her into a corner, with security following like ghosts. He shouts that this is all insane. He demands to know why she kept the company a secret for their entire marriage. Lena looks into his eyes and sees that familiar empty space. He isn't asking about her heart, he only cares about the money. He saw her life as a bank account he had the right to spend. She tells him she just wanted to be loved for herself, not her balance. He only scoffs with bitter hate. Heals. She tells him she never changed. She just kept her finances private. His face is tight with rage. He feels like a fool for his ruled an empire. Explains she wanted a life built on something better than power games. How noble, he spits with a bitter sneer. He is drowning in the shame he just went through. The embarrassment eats him alive because his real self has been shown in the cruelest light possible. He is finally seen for who he is. Feels. He only cares about his ego, not her pain. She reminds him that he was the one who pushed her away. It is her company, and he would have known that if he had ever listened instead of preaching. He tries to call her a liar, but she cuts him off. She tells him she knows about Candace, that she has known for 6 months. Richard turns white, his lips shaking but making no noise. He stammers that it isn't what she thinks. He is lost. It is final. Feels. Lena retorts that it is exactly what she suspects. She has pored over every message, every word where he called her needy, and plotted to ditch her once her money was his. With a sharp, icy smile, she reminds him that his financial outlook just got very complicated. He stands paralyzed by her surveillance, but she simply notes that he left the gate wide open. She feels no guilt for uncovering his lies. To find the architect of his ruin, he only needs a mirror. Feels. He is stunned that she stayed quiet for 6 months while knowing the truth.
She explains that she was busy orchestrating her exit.
A tactical move far superior to his sloppy, desperate plans. Suddenly, Patricia enters, her heels clicking against the floor with predatory precision. She demands a private family talk, but Lena cuts her off. They are not family. As Patricia tries to use marriage vows as a weapon, Lena reaches into her bag. The envelope is pulled into the light at last. Feels. Lena announces these are the divorce papers. Her legal team will call his first thing tomorrow. Richard stares at the stack of paper as if it might explode in his hands. He whispers, asking if she is actually serious. Feels. Lena tells him the marriage died a long time ago, and tonight is just the funeral. Patricia starts a lecture on the sanctity of their vows, but Lena just points toward a shrinking Candace. Patricia snaps that this is all about the fortune. Feels. Losing her cool as she accuses Lena of orchestrating a public shaming. Feels. Lena finds a dark humor in their rage. They mistake her brutal honesty for an attack. Yes, this was all planned. She has built a financial fortress that Richard will never penetrate. When Patricia threatens to take this to a judge, Lena welcomes the fire. She wants the public record to show the truth, the gap between her empire and his betrayal. Let the world see a wife who built power in silence while her husband strayed. Feels. This story will lead the morning news a public execution of the Bennett name. Patricia stands frozen in her rage, whispering threats about what comes next. But Lena had nothing left to lose. For 5 hours she lived like a ghost in her own house, buried under their total indifference. If they want a scandal, she will give them a masterpiece. She has the evidence, the money, and the lawyers to finish this. James finally breaks the silence, admitting the bitter truth. Their son destroyed himself. Feels. You threw her away because you thought her silence meant she was weak. Now the bill is due. Richard's voice shakes as he begs for the loyalty James will no longer provide. The patriarch sees the board clearly now. His son broke his vows and shamed his wife, only to realize she has more power than the entire Bennett dynasty. While Patricia screams about a legacy that is already nothing but ash, Lena remains untouched by the noise. She gives one final order: watch her leave. Feels. At the door, Lena strikes one last time. She tells Patricia that every Bennett investment tied to Morrison Holdings will face a forensic audit at sunrise. If there is rot, and they both know there is, she will cut the ties immediately. She vanishes into the night before they can even speak. A wall of security keeps the family back while Richard's cries echo behind her. Grace notes the sheer intensity of the collapse, but Lena feels only the clarity of the end. No more shadows. Feels. Lena refuses to let Richard control the narrative. Though reporters are already calling, she will wait until tomorrow morning to start the storm. Her priority is to survive the gala and get back to her sanctuary, a penthouse bought with her own cold fury. She moves through the ballroom with the poise of a queen, handling shareholders with ease. She looks like a steel executive, but inside, the structure is under heavy pressure. The weight of her own revolution is finally starting to take its toll. Feels. The reality of her public war and private pain finally hits home. On a dark balcony, she gasps for air in the freezing winter wind. For years, she hid her true self, and now that the mask is gone, she feels empty. When Grace finds her, Lena admits the power she expected feels more like a hollow ache. Grace reminds her that this is the cost of freedom. When you burn your world for the truth, you must stand in the ashes. Heals. Lena wonders if that life was ever hers, or if she was just a character in a story Richard wrote. Grace tells her not to carry his shame. His betrayal was his own fault. Though Lena regrets staying quiet for so long, Grace calls it survival in a tank of sharks. Now that the divorce is real and the secret is out, her world has changed. She fears being an outsider in her own circle, but Grace promises that real loyalty survives the fire. Heals. Her father's old warning rings in her ears. Huge wealth often ruins real love. People see the gold before they ever see the person. Lena once thought hiding her money would protect her heart, but she sees now that a marriage built on secrets cannot stand. Hardening her resolve, she prepares to go back inside. Grace thinks the crowd has seen enough, but Lena isn't doing this for them. She is standing for Morrison Holdings and her father's legacy. She cannot break tonight. Heals. She refuses to fall apart over the ruins of a dead marriage. Grace tells her to focus on healing, but Lena finds business much easier to handle than a broken heart. As they walk back in, the gala is ending. People are still whispering, looking for more drama, but the Bennett chairs are empty. That vacant table is a monument to a life burned to the ground in a single night. The change is total. It is finally over. Heals. Staring at the empty seats, Lena wonders if showing her strength sooner would have changed things. But she knows better. The rot was deep. Richard didn't want an equal. He wanted a trophy he could control. He wanted a woman to take his scraps with a smile. Lena was never that submissive ghost. She just wore the mask until she couldn't breathe. By 11 p.m., the guests are gone, leaving her alone on a silent stage. Heals. Jeffrey gives the final security report while Grace sends the staff home. Lena stands in the quiet room, haunted by the success of her own revenge. She has her name back, her power, and her company. Still, the silence feels heavy. Grace leads her toward the exit, Lena her. It is time to go home. Lena follows, her resistance gone. As the elevator doors close, she looks at the room one last time. It is empty. Heals. This floor saw the death of a quiet wife and the rise of a powerful executive. Tomorrow, the media will hind his lawyers while Patricia plans her next move. Even the mistress will vanish once the money is gone. But for now, Lena goes home to her penthouse, a fortress she built herself, free from Richard. Here she can finally let the grief in, away from the world. After 5 years of silence, tonight is hers. Tomorrow she rebuilds. Heals. Tonight, she takes back the name Lena Morrison. She is exhausted, but free. A space she bought through a shell company for this very moment. High on the 27th floor, the windows look out at the stars, a nod to her father's vision. Grace has already moved her life here. The files, the ledgers, the truth. Lena kicks off her shoes and walks across the cold floor, her silk dress rustling. She watches the city, a shadow against the night. Heals. Somewhere out there, Richard is in shock while Patricia yells at her legal team.
The mistress is likely erasing every trace of her existence. Lena let the bridges burn. She won't carry that weight anymore.
Her phone buzzes with 47 messages and 15 missed calls. She is the city's newest obsession. Investors offer praise and reporters beg for a word. Everyone wants a piece of the new queen, but she is spent. The fight goes on, but she is safe in her fortress. Heals. Then the messages from Richard start coming. He is erratic, flipping between anger and begging, demanding she talk to him. He thinks she owes him an explanation despite what he did. He is wrong. She systematically blocks him from her life. His only way to reach her now is through a lawyer. Grace brings her tea, her presence a silent vow of loyalty. Lena tries to send her home, but Grace stays put. They are in this together now. There is no turning back. Heals. Lena confesses that the silence must break. Tonight's charade was more draining than any corporate raid she'd ever orchestrated. A weary ghost of a smile plays on her mouth as she rests. The delivery was perfect, better than she imagined. Heals. Grace calls her a hurricane in silk, an unstoppable power. She claims Lena's late father would have been beamed with pride. That name brings a cold spike of grief to her heart. She knows he'd have scolded her instead. Heals. He would have asked why she wasted years on a man who showed his true ugly colors a decade ago. Heals. Maybe he knew that love is fueled by nothing but blind optimism. It keeps you anchored when you should run, hunting for a ghost of a man who isn't coming back. Lena sips her tea, feeling her father's presence in the warm steam. Feels. 5 years she spent waiting for the version of Richard she loved to return. Grace speaks softly. People don't go backward. They evolve, or sometimes they just leave us behind in the dust. Lena is struck by the truth of it. Feels. Grace says she learned it by watching Lena survive the impossible. They drift into a heavy, thick silence. Feels. Outside, the city lights hide 10,000 private tragedies. Grace warns her that the divorce will be a bloodbath, even with a solid prenup. Lena looks her in the eye and drops the bomb. There is no agreement. Grace freezes. How? Richard thought she was penniless. His ego was his blind spot. A king doesn't fear a woman with nothing. This won't be a trial, it will be a slaughter. He will come for half of her empire. But Lena has kept every paper trail, every single receipt. From the moment they said, "Heels, I have everything." He gave nothing to this company. I built this legacy brick by brick before he even knew my name. Even the roof over our heads was bought with my hidden money. My legal team has been sharpening their blades for months. Grace stares, Heels, mesmerized by the strategy. You planned this like a chess grandmaster, she says. I had no choice. Perfection was the only way out alive. Richard has old money and older friends. Without this shield, they would have turned me to ash. Heels. Grace warns that they'll still come for her. Let them. I have the one thing they can't bribe, the truth. Heels. Every word I said is documented fact. I didn't need lies, just the courage to step into the light. This honesty is a wall they can't climb. Her phone buzzes on the table. It's her lawyer, Harold Sterling. I saw the news, he says. It was theater at its finest. Do we file? Tomorrow morning, she replies. Have the papers in his hand by noon. A clean break, built on the fact that I am the one who built this house. I'm keeping the keys to the kingdom because I'm the one who laid the foundation. Feels. That's the plan, but his lawyers are going to play dirty. They'll claim he was the emotional rock, the one keeping the home together. It's a lie, but they'll scream it anyway. Get ready for them to drag your name through the mud. They'll call you a cold, Feels, calculating woman who used him for his status. Lena gives a sharp, bitter laugh. I was the one making the money. I was protecting my freedom, not chasing his. Truth won't stop their lies. They'll invent any story to win. Feels. We have to make sure our proof incinerates their little fairy tale. Feels. The files are ready. Harold's voice turns dark. This is going to get ugly, Lena. Violent and televised. Richard is losing his grip and his family is panicked. And desperate men do desperate things. Lock your doors. Tell your security to stay sharp. Feels. Most importantly, don't talk to him. Not a word. Everything goes through my office now. I understand, she says. Good. Get some sleep. The real war starts at sunrise. Lena hangs up and stares at the black screen, waiting for the light. Feels. It's the suffocating stillness that comes right before the storm hits. Feels. Half a year ago, when she first saw the proof of his cheating, she imagined this moment, the relief of the truth, throwing away the mask. She expected to feel light, but instead she just feels empty. Drained. Raw. Regrets? Grace asks. Not one. Feels. But tearing apart a life together is just the beginning of a very long funeral. Tonight was the final speech. Now comes the legal war, the cameras, and the wreckage of my past. You aren't starting from nothing, Grace argues. You have the firm, the name, Feels, and the power. I own things, Grace. That's not the same as actually living. Feels. When was the last time you did something just for you? Not for the board or the brand, but for Lena. She searches her mind and finds only a void. Maybe 5 years back. Before the lies, before the contract, before she became a ghost in her own hallways. Feels. Back when she was just a daughter grieving her father. I don't remember, she whispers. Then that's the real work. Finding out who Lena Morrison is when the cameras are off. That sounds terrifying, she admits. It sounds necessary. Lena walks to the glass. Feels. The city pulses below her like a racing heart in the dark. Feels. Millions of people moving down there, each with their own silent battles. She'd spent 5 years making herself small so Richard could feel like a giant. Muting her voice for his ego, twisting herself to fit his needs. Feels. She'd lost the way back to who she used to be. Tomorrow, the curtain rises. The secret is out. The world will see Lena Morrison as a powerhouse, a woman of immense strength. The press will try to tear her apart piece by piece. But tonight, Feels, wrapped in red silk as the quiet holds her, Lena makes a silent promise to herself. Feels. She is done playing small. No more hiding. No more acting like a supporting character to protect a man's fragile ego. She gave 5 years of her life to that mistake. Never again. You're right, she tells Grace. I have to find the woman I left behind. Feels. I need to see my own face when there's no audience watching. But where do I start? Lena gives a faint smile. I know, my father's papers. The personal letters and journals he left for me. I hid them away because the pain was too much, but I'm ready now. Heels, I'm ready to break the wax seals. Heels. I'm ready to hear what he had to say. A good place to start, Grace says. They spend the next hour planning for the chaos ahead. Grace will handle the press while Lena keeps the company steady. Heels. She has to prove that her personal life falling apart won't sink her business empire. In between the battles, she'll go looking for her own soul. At midnight, Grace leaves. Lena locks the door, standing alone in her quiet penthouse. This is her world now, Heels. The one place where the mask finally comes off. She slips out of the red silk into something old and comfortable. Heels. She washes off the makeup. In the mirror, she sees an old friend, the woman she was before she met Richard. Her phone vibrates again. It's him. Lena, this is a scam, the text reads. You'll pay for embarrassing me like this. My lawyers will destroy you. Heels. She deletes it instantly. His threats are empty noise. His team will attack, but they'll fail. She hasn't broken any laws. She was just far more powerful than he ever realized. That's not a lie. It's just growth. Heels. She lies back in bed and feels something shift inside. It isn't peace yet, but it's a start. Heels. The truth was finally out there. She had reclaimed her name. She was building a world where she didn't have to play small for a man's insecure pride. Tomorrow would be a battlefield of lawyers, hungry reporters, and Richard's rage. Heels. But tomorrow also held a quiet promise, a chance to lead her company without wearing a mask, a chance to be whole in every room she entered. She wanted to know what a real, honest life felt like after years of pretending. Heels. Lena let the darkness take her and, for the first time in forever, fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Heels. No more tossing and turning, no more fear that Richard would find her out, just the peaceful darkness she had worked for. The storm was coming, but Lena Morrison was ready. She was finished apologizing. She was the chief executive. Heels. She was the legacy of Thomas Morrison. She was a woman of wealth and power that Richard could never touch. Freedom sounded like total silence. At 9:47 a.m., the divorce papers were served. Half a minute later, Heels, the phone exploded with Richard's scream. The war had officially begun, and she stood her ground with the quiet strength of a mountain. Heels. He called her crazy, swearing he'd never sign the papers. Lena stands in the cold marble hall of her office, her voice like ice. You have no choice, Richard. This marriage died because of your lies and your betrayals. He begs her, Heels, bringing up their past and his bruised ego. But Lena knows the truth. He treated her like a ghost while he chased his own desires. You built our life on a pile of sand, she says. Richard's voice drops into something dark and poisonous. Heels. It was the sound of a hunter realizing he's lost his greatest prize forever. Heels. He threatens to burn everything down, claiming she's only rich because of her father. Lena almost laughs. She turned the company into a global titan while he just played the part of a husband. He claims he gave her status, but the irony is thick. Heels. She owned every room she walked into before he ever showed up. He just wasn't smart enough to see it. Richard groans in pure frustration. It's the moment he realizes that the woman he thought he controlled was the one pulling the strings the whole time. Heels. His power was nothing but a ghost. Heels. She cut the line before he could say another word. Her skin hummed with the heat of 5 years of buried rage finally boiling over. Grace, her deputy, lingered in the doorway with a worried glance. 10 minutes until the board meeting. Heels. The moment had arrived. Lena took a deep breath, feeling the heavy weight of her responsibilities. This was the shift. She would enter that room as herself. No shadows, no smoke. Just the woman who had ruled this empire from the dark. Heels. The true queen was finally stepping into the light. Heels. For the first time, they would look upon their leader without the mask. She smoothed her emerald suit and stepped into the boardroom. The air was thick with silence until they rose. Every director standing in a quiet show of fealty. These men had served her father and mocked her strength, yet she had ruled them from afar. She took the seat at the head of the long table, her father's chair. It had been empty for 5 years, waiting for her touch. This was her kingdom now, and they knew the order. Heels. She thanked them for the smooth transition. Walter Chin, her father's oldest ally, offered a knowing grin. He told her she belonged in that seat and that the world deserved the truth. The room pulsed with energy as the pieces of her fractured life finally clicked into place. No more masks or hidden games. As the meeting closed, Lena looked over her counsel. I wish to address the headlines, she said softly. The real story was just beginning, and she was the one holding the pen for every single chapter. Heels. She promised the board her divorce wouldn't touch the firm's integrity. Walter nodded in support, but Patricia Wilson remained cold. Richard was already leaking lies, painting her as an emotionally broken wife to the press. Lena only felt her resolve harden. "Let him talk," she declared. "My legal team is recording every word, one lie, one breath of slander, and we will dismantle his entire life in a court of law. He has no idea what is coming for him. Feels." Lena refused to crawl into the gutter with a man like him. Her father, Thomas, always said that excellence is the only cure for a lie. She retreated to her sanctuary, his old office, and felt a sudden rush of power. The heavy mahogany desk felt like an anchor, still carrying the ghost of his cigars. Looking out at her corporate empire from the window, she knew she had polished this legacy. Now, it was her sacred duty to defend it with everything she had. Feels. Grace brings the news, and the headlines are burning. The secret CEO tears down her cheating husband. Public opinion is split. Half the internet cheers for a queen taking back her crown, while skeptics wonder about 5 years of silence. Was there a darker reason for the shadows? Meanwhile, Richard is everywhere on the news, acting the part of the wounded husband. The man is a professional liar, and now the whole world is his stage. He is playing them all. Feels. Richard is giving a performance worthy of an Oscar, playing the betrayed spouse with perfect tears. He is carefully rewriting their history to look like a martyr, erasing his own affairs from the script. Grace calls it the Bennett family specialty, cruelty dressed up as grief. As Lena watches the screen, she remains a cold, silent observer. "Let him speak," she whispers to the empty room. The weight of his own lies will eventually be the thing that crushes him. Feels. The attack turns vicious with surgical precision. Patricia, Richard's mother, goes on television with practiced tears, hinting that Lena's double life was a sign of a mental breakdown. It is a cold move to twist Lena's strength into a sickness, framing her success as a symptom of trauma. From her office, Lena watches them try to gaslight the entire world. They are trying to steal her power by simply calling her crazy. It is a desperate, pathetic game. Feels. Lena is quietly seething. The story has shifted from Richard's cheating to an attack on her mind. This is a character assassination meant to kill her career before the lawyers even walk in. If the board thinks she is unstable, her legacy is gone. Grace is blunt. You have to take the story back. You have to tell them why you stayed in the dark. If you don't speak now, the Bennetts will bury the truth forever under a mountain of lies. Feels. She never wanted to play their theatrical games. The Bennetts were empire was under siege. Fine, Lena's. We're slowly rotting her reputation. Get me an interview. But make it count. She picks business today with Jennifer Adams, a reporter famous for her lethal questions. 3 hours later, the studio lights are blinding. Jennifer is a stone wall. Lena feels the eyes of the world on her, waiting for the exact moment she finally breaks. Feels. Jennifer starts with the sharpest blade. Why the lie? Why hide who you were for 5 years? Lena doesn't blink. When my father died, I was only 27 years old. I was a young woman handed the keys to a multi-billion-dollar kingdom while the world placed bets on my failure. It felt like I was suffocating. I needed to know I could lead through my own talent, not just because my last name was Morrison. I had to prove it. Feels. Everyone saw my youth and my sadness as flaws. I needed a vacuum to prove my worth without the weight of their expectations. As for Richard, honestly, I just wanted one part of my life that wasn't a business deal. When we met, I was drowning under my inheritance. He saw me, not the CEO. I wanted to protect that one piece of real life. Did it work? Lena gives a hollow, sharp smile. Not even close. It was a total and complete disaster. Feels. The marriage was doomed before it started. Richard didn't want a partner. He wanted a trophy for his ego. I was never going to shrink myself to fit in his shadow. Now his family plays dirty, using my privacy as a weapon to hide his affair and the way he left me at the gala. It is easier to call me crazy than to admit he was a coward. He was cold, cruel, and replaced me with his mistress in public. Feels. People think that gala was just petty revenge. They think I wanted to shame him. In truth, it was a moment of honesty. It was the second I finally stepped into my true role at Morrison Holdings. Richard made his own beds. He chose to treat his wife like a ghost. He chose his mistress in front of the whole world. I simply gave him the stage to show everyone who he really is. Call me strategic if you want. I am done being invisible. Feels. I refused to let this marriage end with him playing the victim while I stayed quiet. I wanted the world to see the rot under his polished skin. That was the point of that night. Throughout the interview, Lena refuses to carry the weight of his mistakes. When the cameras stop, Jennifer is clearly impressed. Off the record, she calls Richard a fool for losing a woman like her. Lena just gives a soft thank you. She finally knows exactly what she is worth. Feels. This interview changes everything. The public is finally seeing the truth behind the curtain. But Jennifer warns her, the Bennetts will not go quietly. Lena is already ready for the war. Back at her office, Richard's lawyers are demanding half of everything she owns. She doesn't even flinch. She sends the papers to Harold Sterling and moves on. By sunset, the interview is live, and the internet is exploding with the fallout of the drama. The storm has officially arrived. Feels. In just 60 minutes, the video hits 1 million views. The comments are a total war zone, but the tide is shifting. People are finally seeing the real story. Grace calls, sounding thrilled. The hashtag #TruthNotDrama is trending everywhere. The public is seeing through Patricia's lies. They realize that protecting a massive legacy from a gold digger isn't insanity. It is smart business. It is a small win. Grace tells her to stay sharp and let the results do the talking. Feels. Lena stands at her window, watching the city lights flicker. Somewhere out there, Richard is falling apart and Patricia is desperate. And the mistress? She is likely realizing the true cost of her choices. Lena is tired, but she feels a deep sense of peace. The divorce will be a nightmare, and the world will keep watching. But she is done playing small. She is Lena Morrison, CEO, survivor, and powerful. She is finally seen, and she isn't going anywhere. Feels. 2 months have passed, and the legal war rages on. There are depositions, news cycles, and constant moves. Richard's team has tried every trick to steal her company. They failed. The divorce is a slow crawl because Richard is fighting for every cent, but Lena is winning. Harold Sterling is a force of nature. He proved the company was hers long before Richard ever showed up. Now they are desperately claiming he gave her emotional support after her father died. Feels. He barely even knew her back then. They had only been dating for a few months. Harold knows they are just chasing ghosts, but the legate will last another 90 days. Lena is patient. She has the truth and the money. What is amazing is how free it feels to be real. No more secret calls or lying about her day. No more pretending to be a simple housewife while running a global empire. The walls have finally come down. Everything is out in the open. Feels. Lena is completely herself now. She radiates true main character energy. Morrison Holdings is reaching new heights because its leaders no longer hiding in the shadows. The staff are energized because they can finally look their boss in the eyes. Everything moves faster without those heavy secrets. During a board meeting, Walter Chin noticed the new vibe. I told him it is the power of being real. Faking it is exhausting, but being yourself is easy. Plus, we just launched the foundation. Feels. The first wave of applications surged in like a tide. Over 2,000 souls laid bare on the conference table. Grace sat there, shadows lengthening as she sifted through the data. These people carried a different spark. Single parents, Feels. Brilliant immigrants and youths holding the same fire Lena's father once possessed. In their ink and pixels, she recognized her real legacy. It wasn't found in glass towers, but in the forgotten. Lena felt a sudden, sharp hunger to do more. Feels. Fund every single one, she commanded. Feels. We provide the tools to build something tangible, Lena insisted, promising to double the stakes next quarter. Grace spoke of the millions at risk, but for Lena that risk was the entire purpose. Why cling to gold when you can rewrite a human fate? Feels. Grace offered a soft smile, certain her father would approve. Nearby, the urban renewal project finally breathed to life. This wasn't merely luxury housing. They were redefining the city pulse through green energy, community, Feels, and the quiet promise of sustainable neighborhoods. Feels. This was true sustainability, deep and unwavering. For once, the headlines focused on her vision, not the wreckage of her divorce, but the ghost that refuses to stay buried. 3 months after the gala, Lena turned a corner at a conference and nearly struck him, Richard. He stood there like a stone monument, solitary and gray. Word was his dalliance with Candace had shattered once she saw the truth. He held no wealth, no power, nothing but a hollow name. Feels. Richard. The name suspended itself in the air while the crowd drifted by, blind to the wreckage between You look, said her voice a steady blade. And you? I am surviving. His eyes darted nervously, his voice falling to a low, rough rasp. Can we talk? Just a moment? Lena glanced at her wrist. 15 minutes until her panel. Fine. In a shadowed corner, she saw the change. Richard looked haggard, his old polish stripped away. I am sorry, he whispered. You deserved better, Eels. Why now? She asked, her gaze piercing. I have had time to look back, so I see the ruin I made instead of growing. Yes, she breathed. You did exactly that. I did not ask for mercy, he said. I only had to confess. You were a magnificent partner, and I was too small to see it. Lena felt the internal knot finally loosen. I am ending the lawsuits. Keep everything, Richard. It is over. Eels. This final act of penance was the first flicker of light in their long, dark narrative. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips as he wished her a man who would cherish her brilliance. Then he vanished. Lena stood in the swirling crowd, feeling the heavy chains of their past dissolve into mist. Maybe redemption is a slow burn, not a sudden flash. It didn't heal the scars, but it granted a quiet peace. Later, when she took the stage, her voice carried a fire that held every soul captive. Eels. The audience sat frozen. Afterward, the elite swarmed her with visions of growth and partnership. The old titles, The Wife the Shadow, had turned to ash. She was Lena Morrison, the architect of her own future. That night, robed in royal blue, she shone with a strength that asked for no leave. No more shrinking. No more fading into the gray. Standing at the epicenter of her world, her existence became an absolute fact. She had ceased apologizing for her space. At last, the queen had claimed her throne. Eels. Witnesses watched her metamorphosis. Where a phantom once walked, a woman of iron and grace had emerged. I simply stopped pretending, she told them, and the truth made her glow. Later, in the velvet silence of the night, Eels, she caught herself humming, a tune lost for years under the debris of her old life. Joy had come home to stay. She had walked through the fire of scandal and a broken marriage. She didn't just survive, she bloomed. Eels. Morrison Holdings was no longer just a business, it was a monument to her resilience. Eels. Her name as a powerful leader was becoming legend. Her influence was absolute, and a strange sense of peace settled in. Then Grace's voice broke the silence. She urged Lena to leave her desk, mentioning her brother, Adrian. He was a visionary in the world of nonprofit tech. Tomorrow, he would speak on accessible education. Grace insisted he was the ideal partner for the foundation. His work was revolutionary, a shift in the world that Lena needed to witness with her own eyes. Eels. Send the info, Lena conceded. Grace left her with a cryptic warning, keep an open mind. Before Lena could ask why, the connection cut to silence. She smiled, sensing Grace's gentle push toward the world of the living. Love was a distant planet to Lena. Her soul was poured entirely into the rebirth of her empire and self. A tech lecture felt like a calm port. This was a duty, not a date. It was a matter of strategy, of networking, and the cold, sharp logic of the industry. Eels. A typical Tuesday in a life finally governed by truth. Moving through the city beneath a canopy of neon, she looked back. Months prior, she was a ghost at her own table. Now, she held the reins of her identity. From the ruins of the past, she sculpted a woman she actually admired. She loved the version of herself that refused to be small. Richard's apology was a soft whisper, but it could not shake the granite foundation she had laid for her new world. Eels. Their marriage had been a hollow vessel long before the betrayal. They were jagged pieces that never truly fit now. Lena stood whole, unbending and self-reliant. That was plenty. She withdrew to her sanctuary, Eels, the place where the masks of the world finally fell away. Looking forward, her life was a map of intention. Adrian's talk, the first foundation grants and new ventures. Her universe was finally full of purpose and real people. Eels. She was no longer waiting for life to start. It was already in full, vibrant motion. Eels. The divorce papers would eventually settle, and the press would find a new victim. Lena kept her eyes on her father's memory and her own growing power. She was reborn, standing at the door of a fresh chapter. The hall buzzed with the static of 1,000 people. Grace had spoken of Adrian, but Lena didn't expect a prophet. Grace whispered the numbers. 50,000 trained in 3 years. He wasn't just a teacher, he was a force of teacher, redrawing the map of hope for the forgotten and the lost. Eels. His mission was to light up the dark corners of the world, teaching the language of tomorrow. Adrian saw the gap between the haves and have-nots and chose to be the bridge. Lena watched, fascinated by his devotion. This wasn't a hobby. It was his heartbeat. He had walked away from a fortune to find real meaning. As the house lights faded and Adrian stepped into the spotlight, Lena leaned in. He had a magnetic, silent power. A man whose simple clothes mattered far less than the heavy purpose he carried. Eels. Good evening, Adrian said, and the air went still. He began with a sharp strike against the current school system, seizing Lena's focus instantly. For an hour, he tore down the walls of elite universities, choosing raw talent over bloodlines. He didn't speak in theory. He spoke of breath and bone, a mother coding by candlelight, and after prison, a farm boy saving his town. These weren't numbers on a page.
They were
Sagas of resurrection driven by his iron vision and his restless, beautiful work. Feels. Talent is everywhere, Adrian declared, but the gates are closed to most. His life was the key. The room exploded in a roar of belief. Lena felt herself caught in his storm of conviction. Later, during the reception, she trailed Grace through a tide of powerful faces. When Grace threw her arms around him and said, "Brother," the truth struck Lena hard. Adrian was kin. When his eyes finally locked onto hers, he gave a warm, knowing smile. "And you," he said softly, "must be the legendary Lena Morrison." He sounded like an old friend. "Grace is your loudest champion," he said with a smile. "I am no legend," Lena replied. "I have only stepped out of the shadows." As their hands met, a deep respect hummed between them. "Visibility looks good on you," he noted. It was a real thought, far better than empty charm. They turned quickly to the Foundation's mission. Saving the grassroots was a shared dream. "My students have the spark. They just need the fuel," he said. For 30 minutes, the crowd vanished. He was more than a partner. He was a man ready to build a legacy by her side. Lena suggested a formal sit-down to forge an alliance, her wealth meeting his genius. It was a clean move, done with her usual sharp grace. They set a date for the following week. "This is strictly business," she whispered to herself. But Grace stood in the shadows with a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Well," she pushed. Lena kept her face like a mask, merely calling his work impressive. Grace's grin grew wider. "Just a professional partnership," she teased, her voice heavy with things unsaid and a future Lena hadn't dared to dream of yet. Lena asked what more there could be, her voice hollow. Grace spoke of Adrian, of his quiet strength and hidden warmth, but Lena cut her off before a spark of romance could ignite. Grace begged her to stop being so clinical, to see the living soul standing there. Yet Lena was still drowning in the wreckage of her marriage. Trust was a ghost, a myth from another lifetime. Richard had taught her that love was just a well-crafted lie. She feared vulnerability was a door she had bolted shut forever, her heart a fortress standing cold against any new betrayal. A week later, Adrian appeared with more than just promises. He brought hard facts and a strategy that echoed her own drive. He mapped out a synergy, her resources fueled by his team's sharp expertise, a bridge from learning to leading. Lena scanned the documents. They were flawless, offering the sharp focus she had lacked in her grief. "This is beautiful," she whispered, the lighting dim around them. He looked her in the eye, his gaze unwavering. "I have been searching for the perfect partner to breathe life into this dream," he said softly. Hours bled together as they wove their visions into one. Adrian listened, shifting his tactics to match her sharp instincts. Before they finished, a launch date was set. 90 days to change everything. "To a fresh start," he said, raising his glass. Lena toasted back, the sound of crystal ringing in the quiet. In the weeks that followed, they became a single machine, fueled by shared intent. To him, she was never a bank account. She was an equal. In the silences between their tasks, something shifted. A deep, heavy respect took root, something real, powerful, and terrifyingly permanent. Lena started living for their daily talks. Adrian cared for her father's legacy as if it were his own, never once pushing against the scars of her past marriage. One afternoon, standing in the dust and skeletal steel of their new center, she finally spoke. "You are different," she said, her voice small against the construction noise. "Most see the money or the scandals first." He looked at her, his eyes clear and focused. "I only see a woman trying to change the world," he replied. In that moment, Lena felt seen for the first time. 6 months pass, and the ghosts of her past begin to fade. Richard finally retreats, realizing he cannot break her. The divorce is final, cold, sharp, and absolute. Lena keeps her place at Morrison Holdings. Harold, her lawyer, delivers the news with a heavy finality. "It is over," he says. "You are free." Looking out at the shimmering city, Lena waits for a spark of joy. "Nothing feels different," she confesses. Harold nods, knowing the truth. "That marriage died years ago," he says. In the silence of her office, she expected to float, but only felt an empty, hollow ache. There are no tears, no cheering, only the quiet shutting of a toxic book. Grace comes in, searching Lena's eyes for a crack, but finds only steel. I am fine, Lena insists. She turns on the champagne and goes back to her desk. Work is her cathedral, heals, her place of healing. Here, she builds a world she can control. Under her hand, Morrison Holdings reaches heights no one imagined. The company is solid, and finally Lena holds the pen. She is writing her own story now, no longer a victim of a man's whims, heals, but the hero of her own life, heals. Her charity work blooms, and her partnership with Adrian feels like clockwork. For once, Lena feels a deep, quiet peace. This is not the fake smile she wore for Richard. This is real. 2 weeks after the papers were signed, heals. Adrian finds her in a shadowed hallway. I need to be honest, he says, his voice deep and steady. Lena feels her heart skip. He whispers. I think you are incredible, he begins. Not just in business, but as a person, heals. Respect you more than anyone I have ever met. To me, you are an absolute equal, heals. I want to know the woman behind the desk, he admits. His voice is raw, without any hidden traps or agendas. I am not ready, Lena says, her poise trembling for a second. The wounds from Richard are still fresh. I am still finding myself, heals. Adrian does not pull away. I understand, he says softly. I'm not pushing you. I just wanted you to know how I feel, so you can decide that no pressure, no rush. She thanks him for his kindness. He keeps his word. They keep working, heals, his respect never wavering, his presence a steady anchor in her storm, heals. He becomes a constant in her world, a man who values her soul over her bank balance. Slowly, Lena begins to see a new sun rising. This is no replacement for Richard. It is a rebirth. She lets her guard down just a fraction, allowing a sliver of hope to leak through. Right now, she is the master of her empire. She is the Morrison, leader, giver, and free. For the first time in 10 long years, she looks at the sunrise and actually looks forward to the day. She is powerful. She is finally whole, heals. A year after her world fell apart, Lena stands in the same hall. Her tower gleams in the night sky, but tonight she does not hide in the dark. She wears an emerald dress, the color of her victory. She is no longer a ghost. She is a queen, heals. Her hair falls in soft waves, and her father's diamonds catch the golden light. Grace checks her watch, standing close. 15 minutes to go, she whispers. Lena looks at her friend with a tired, happy smile. Thank you for staying, she says. Grace grins, heals, knowing exactly how much this night cost. Heals. Getting soft on me? Grace teases, her eyes twinkling. I won't cry and ruin this makeup, Lena laughs. I am just so grateful you held me together when everything broke. Grace squeezes her hand. That is what family does, me, you, and Adrian, heals. Just hearing his name makes Lena smile. 3 months ago, they sat down for a real dinner. No games, just 4 hours of the naked truth. They talked about old dreams and new fears. At the end, he asked to see her again. She said yes instantly, heals. It was the easiest choice she had ever made, heals. Their love grows slowly, without force, 2 paths finally merging into one. He watches her from the crowd, a true partner in every part of her life. Their big project is now a national success, helping hundreds find their own freedom, heals. The room is packed with power and big ideas. Reporters are desperate for her words. But as she looks out at the faces, one thing matters most. The Bennetts are gone. Their poison has finally washed away, leaving Lena to stand in the bright, heals, clear light of the life she built herself, heals. Patricia begged everyone she knew for a ticket, but Lena was a wall of ice. No, this is her kingdom now, her work, her breath, her victory. The Bennetts are just a tragic story she has finally finished reading. Jeffrey Santos steps to the mic, heals, and the room goes dead silent. Welcome to the second Morrison Gala, he says. As the lights dim, Lena takes a long breath. Here she is, a ghost begging to be seen. Tonight, she is the star. Jeffrey smiles at the crowd. Last year was a circus. Tonight, heals, we have less drama and much more soul, heals. A ripple of laughter goes through the room. They all remember the scandal, the messy divorce that fed the city's hunger for gossip. But to Lena, that feels like a dream from someone else's life. Tonight isn't about secrets, Jeffrey continues, heals. It is about results. Under Lena Morrison, we haven't just made money, we have changed the world. On the screens behind him, images glow, families moving into new homes, green gardens pushing through city concrete, solar panels drinking in the light, heals. This isn't just business. It is a map for a better world, built on the solid ground of hope, heals. Look past the architecture. See the souls. The screen shows people who went from nothing to owning their own shops, parents finally breathing easy, men finding their dignity after prison, kids from the streets becoming leaders. Jeffrey says it best, heals. We didn't just give them money, we gave them a reason to believe. Lena's eyes fill with tears. This was her father's dream, bigger than he ever imagined. It is proof that a company can have a heart, feels. Because real success isn't about numbers in a bank. It is about lives changed. Please welcome our CEO, Lena Morrison, feels. Lena walks to the stage as the room explodes. Everyone is on their feet. They aren't just clapping for a survivor. They are cheering for a leader who truly did the work. She grips the lectern, her eyes scanning the crowd for an anchor. She finds Adrian, feels, and his steady gaze keeps her grounded. Grace gives a small nod of triumph from the wings. Walter Chin watches with fatherly pride. Thank you, Lena says, her voice firm. Last year, I came to find my voice. Tonight, feels. I am here to show you the future we are building together. Feels. She outlines a map where 20 cities thrive and 10,000 souls find meaning. My father taught me wealth hollow if it fails to open doors, she says. Victory was about distribution, not profit. An image of young Thomas Morrison glows. Lena's poise wavers as she gazes at her father. I miss him daily, she murmurs, yet he is here. In every beam we place and every life we change. His real gift was not a firm. It was the bravery to lift others as you rise. Feels. A heavy silence falls as she speaks. This year taught me that hiding offers no shelter, she notes. Truth, even when it cuts, is better than a comfortable lie. Character is the only foundation that holds. She pauses, breathing deeply. For 5 years, I played a part, living a life that crushed my soul. When my world broke in public, I thought it was the end. But in the ruins, I found something better. I found my freedom, feels. The room feels the weight of her journey. They saw her fall and her long walk back. This is no plea for pity, she declares. It is a statement of truth. Our success this year was no accident. It was the harvest of our honesty, feels. We built this kingdom on real values, not fake smiles. Screens show the proof. New jobs, green tech, and lives restored. These are human stories, not just numbers. I do not have to ask you to see the real Lena tonight, she smiles. Feels. You are already looking at her. Now see the future we build together. Feels. A world of possibility, a legacy that outlives us. Lena raises her glass, and hundreds of others follow. To my father for teaching me how to lead. To my team for making this dream real. To our partners who believe in second chances. And to everyone here who uses their power to spark real change. Thank you. The applause hits like a physical wave, vast and warm. Guests wipe away tears while others glow with pride. As Lena walks off, her heart feels a lightness she has not known in decades. Feels. Adrian meets her at the steps. No words are needed. His hand on hers is enough before he steps back. That was who loves her strength. The rest of the night is a blur of handshakes and new plans. Leaders want to work together, and reporters ask about what is next. Lena moves through the crowd with perfect grace. Suddenly, she stops near the table where Richard broke her heart a year ago. A shadow of the past, in a room now filled with light and life, feels. She lingers there, remembering the sharp pain of being replaced by her husband's lover. Back then, she was a ghost in her own house. Look at you now, Walter Chin says, appearing at her side. What a change. I was always here, Walter, she says quietly. I just saw that would be proud, he whispers. It is more than just a business. It is the heart you gave it. You are leading with truth, Lena. That's
How a life should be built.
you have become the teacher now, feels. The night deepens. As the room empties and the lights dim, Lena stands in the quiet hall. Grace and Adrian walk toward her, their footsteps sharp on the marble. You did it, Grace says softly. You turned all that pain into something beautiful. We did it, Lena corrects her. This win belongs to everyone who chose to build instead of break. Still, Adrian adds, it took real guts to stand here and take back your name. It took courage to face the truth when running would have been easier. Feels. Lena sees it again, the red dress, the shadows, watching Richard throw her away like trash. She remembers the exact second the chain snapped. Taking that stage felt like destiny then, but now it feels different. That night was never about her ex or the drama. It was not even about the company. It was about Lena Morrison finally choosing her own heart after years of sacrifice. I think I am ready to go home, she tells them. They walk to the car together, wrapped in a hard-won peace. Feels. Adrian has his own car, but he walks them to theirs anyway. Thanks, Witha says. Where else would I be, he asks, with a smile. This matters. You matter. To me. A quiet admission, but it carries she is finally seen. Coffee is tomorrow? She asks. I have new ideas. It is a date, he says, or a meeting, or both, she laughs. Both is perfect. She watches him go, then looks at Grace. I know, Grace says. You are glowing, feels. Is this how it feels? She wonders. Just real happiness? Exactly like that, Grace says. The ride home is silent and calm. Out on the curb, Lena, she's up at her finally breathe. Inside, she swaps her gown for soft clothes to make. Standing at the window, sees the city lights sparkle. Somewhere out there, Richard is trying to find himself without her. Dating, working, failing to be the man she needed. She wishes him well, then turns toward her own bright future. Feels. Lena hopes he finds his way and learns from the mess they made. And Patricia? She is likely still trying to fix her ruined reputation after the scandal. Let her chase those ghosts. It does not matter to Lena now. Candace is gone. Feels. A shadow that vanished in the light. Lena thinks of her for a second before the memory fades. That was a story from another life. Today, the company has a new soul. The foundation is saving lives. Green business is growing. Feels. And her bond with Adrian is real. But the biggest win? She finally found herself. Feels. Lena Morrison stands tall, real, open, and free. She built an empire, but it is not just made of glass and steel. It is a kingdom of the spirit. Here, success is not a number on a page. It is the heartbeat of changed lives. Feels. Power is not for keeping people down. It is a hand reaching out to help them up. This is the dream her father died for, a vision she carried until it touched the stars. She raises her tea to the skyline. Feels. A quiet toast to the man who began this and the future she is building. We did it, Dad. We did it. Below, the city lights shine like a million souls finally breathing. Feels. In that ocean of light, Lena Morrison has found her true north. She is done hiding in the corners of another person's ballroom. No more shrinking her soul to squeezing into a mold that never fit. She stands here now, the axis of her own universe. Leading, loving, and fully present. This is her authentic legacy, rooted in truth and power. It is a life of joy finally earned. It is more than enough. In this quiet moment under the sky, it is everything.